Hi, welcome back to the podcast. I'm Havilah, and I want to welcome you to a brand new year and a brand new series. I'm so excited you're here. We have a ton of new listeners, and I know that you may be popping on here for the first time, and you might be wondering what this whole podcast is. And really simply, this podcast is to help uncomplicate spiritual and even lifestyle things that we don't know how to do. It's to help uncomplicate it so that you can get on with living it rather than trying to understand it. And so what you're going to find on this podcast and everything that myself and my team have their hands in is a few core values. One of the core values we have here at the podcast and at Truth the Table is that it should be practical. Whatever you learn, there should be a practical application, and it should feel like something that you can use in your everyday life and understand. Secondly, we want it to be complete. And what I mean by that is every thought, every topic, every series, we want to make sure that you leave with something that is complete. So you never feel behind, you never feel lost. You get to start right where you are and pick up right where you left off. That's the goal. And thirdly, we want this series to be concise. So you're going to notice that a lot of things we teach are kind of brief and amazing. They're to the point, they're blunt, they're simple. And it's because I don't want you to spend all your energy listening to hours of content. I want you to be able to listen to something and then go away and meditate on it and think about it and process it with God. That's very important. And then lastly, I want it to be actionable. I want to give you an action step, something to think about, a question to ask yourself, just a way for you to live it out. We're amazed as we've done research that a lot of people on this podcast that listen to this podcast, you are leaders. You lead your church, you lead your city, you lead your business. We have a high percentage of you that are in a leadership role. And so you're listening to this not just to lead your own life, but to help others lead the best life that they are called to live. And so a lot of things that we try to uncomplicate is so that you can take it and you can implement it, but you can also begin to educate those around you so we all can live that abundant life that we all have been promised to live. So welcome to this month's series. We are jumping into a brand new series, and it's called Intentional Living. We're going to unpack how to live an intentional life. And I get it. It is January and everything is about gym memberships and pulling the exercise clothes back out, cleaning out that fridge. You know, every year in our home, my dad would call a media fast for 30 days. It was horrible. He would turn the TV off and we would sit in silence. No, I'm kidding. But we would sit quietly, and he loved to read and research. I'm not a reader, so I remember just feeling like, oh, this is horrible. But now I understand why he did it, because his goal was to kind of press reset, to kind of shock your body, your system, your mind into, hey, wake up. This is a new year. This is a new season, and it's time to jump in. Now, for those of you that are here and you are maybe not sure who's watching this, I also want you to know we have our Truth Academy here. And that's our community. That's the people that I mentor from my kitchen table every single day. And we have hundreds and thousands of women around the world that join that community. And I hope that you would consider that as you listen to this. So if that's you, I'm glad you're here. You're my people, and I'm really glad you're listening today. So we're going to jump into the series of living with intentions. Now, I could have gone a lot of different directions. You know, I'm a preacher. I like the word. I obviously live by the word. And I could easily have gone into a biblical story of living with intention. But I have this kind of nerdy side to me that I really enjoy neuroscience and behavioral science and psychology. And I love all of that as well. I think it might have been because having been diagnosed with postpartum depression 3 times, sitting in a counselor's office for years, and then ministering to thousands of people and hearing their stories and their lives, I have such empathy and compassion, and I want to help. And I know sometimes it's not just a story, but that there's the way that we're wired matters to God. It matters in how he created us. So what I want to do is, because we're starting the year, we're starting a series, I want to jump into teaching you how your brain works, how my brain works, and what's the best way to create change and to have lasting change. Because I can give you a lot of inspiration, but in order for you to change your life, change your mind, change your behavior, you have to know how God created you. So we're going to look at what it looks like to have practical intention. Now, all of us want to live with intention. I mean, it sounds like, yeah, I want to live an intentional life. And it sounds so sexy and fun and like, empowered, but it is not easy to live an intentional life. And anyone who says it is, they're lying to you. That is a lie because it is not true. Living intentionally takes work. But the goal of having an intentional life, or the goal of intention, is that it gives us this huge opportunity to not only just get through our days, but it actually gives us an opportunity to live them out, to intentionally steward the days that we've been given. And it also helps us know where we want to go, but then also create goals and make decisions and develop relationships that are in that direction. So it helps us have an intentional blueprint to what we believe we're called to do, what we're trying to build in our own lives. So because you guys know, I'm not an expert in behavioral science, but I do have a favorite book. You can see it. I've loved this book. I read it every year. It's well loved. It's falling apart. I actually bought a couple more. They're used now. I don't even think they're in print anymore, that I'm going to go back through. But this book is one of my favorites. It's called How to Have a Good Day by Carolyn Webb. How to Have a Good Day by Dr. Carolyn Webb. And what I love about this, she's not a doctor, sorry, Carolyn Webb, is that she studies behavioral science and kind of the practical functions of your brain. And she really begins to dissect how our brain works and how that moves through our choices, our behaviors, and also our bodies and what that looks like. Sometimes when I used to hear science or biology or psychology, I used to have this kind of warning sign of, but theology is the main, expert. Theology is what we should be listening to. Absolutely. But what I have found is as I've studied science and studied psychology in those different areas, that it always tells the reality of a real God. When you study biology, when you study science, when you study behavioral science or even psychology, it is amazing that the truths that people discovered hundreds of years ago or even 1,000 years ago all happened 4,000 years ago. It was all written in the Bible that there was reality to it. So I love that. And what I love about Matthew 22, verse 37 is Jesus is speaking. These are the red words. And he says, Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind." And I love that because a lot of us think, we should love God. But he's saying, listen, this is the first and the greatest commandment is to not just give God your heart, not just to give God your soul, but your mind. And your mind in the Greek means intellect. It means the way that you think, the way that you behave. And if you get a little deeper, you'll find out that Greek word for mind means deep thought. It actually means understanding, intellect, and reasoning. It refers to the ability to think, reflect, and to use logic. It's really cool. So in biblical context, when Jesus says to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, that word emphasizes loving God with one's thoughts, one's intentions, and the full capacity of reason and understanding. So I hope you're catching what I'm trying to give you, which is when we start to dialogue about how God made us and our brains and behavioral science and intentional living, I don't want you to separate your theology with your biology or your theology with your psychology, but I want you to understand that as we dive into the realities of how we were created, we can actually love God at a deeper level when we know how we were created. So let's jump into what we're going to look at this month. And the primary concept is simple. It's really understanding our priorities and that our assumptions determine our perception. Meaning, when we begin to understand how our brain works, we will begin to learn to be more intentional and be more deliberate and understand that our priorities and the assumptions we make about God or life or others will actually determine the reality or the reality that we see. Okay. So there are some big themes we're going to jump into this month. And I'm going to take each week and dissect that. But this week, we're going to talk about the two system brain. Next week, we're going to talk about the defense and the discover axle. And then the third week, we're going to talk about the mind and the body loop. So if you are just jumping on this podcast, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the other parts of this series. It's going to be very important because it's all going to sync together. And we have many, many moments that I think you're going to love when it comes to this topic. So we have to understand that your brain, what they have found is that our brains are in two different systems. We work in two different systems and they're split and they are complementary. So they're automatic, they happen in our brain. And it's really important to understand that because when you understand that, then you'll understand how to change your behavior. Because if you just go, well, I just thought it, well, actually you won't be able to be deliberate. So let's understand those two parts of our brain. So one is very deliberate and controlled, and the other is automatic and instinctive. So one of them is very deliberate, controlled. It's the adult in the relationship. And then we have our automatic, instinctive, impulsive part of our brain. And they both actually complement each other. One is not immature and one's mature, but they both complement each other. But you have to understand how they work in your life or you'll get stuck not being able to change your behavior because you don't know where it's coming from. So this is really what your brain is. And please don't feel jealous of my drawing or my writing because not all of us can have the gifts. I'm teasing. But there are basically two parts to our brain. So like I said, one of ours is very slow. So our slow part of our brain is the deliberate. So, and I know you guys can't see all of this, but hopefully you'll be able to see some of it. So this is your deliberate. This is your adult. This is the part of your brain that thinks very important thoughts and is very, forward thinking. So I want to read this to you. Your deliberate system is responsible for sophisticated functions such as reasoning, self-control, and forward thinking. It excels at handling unfamiliar, complex, and abstract things. But it also has a limitation. It has limited capacity and it gets tired quickly. If you're always in your deliberate part of your brain, it's great because it does help you uncomplicate and really understand things and to kind of grow in that area. But if you're always in your deliberate brain, if you've ever gone to college, been a part of a class, had to learn something, this is exhausting. It's important, but it's exhausting. And so when it's overused or overloaded or distracted, it's really hard for us to become wise and balanced and reliable. When we're in this, when our deliberate brain gets exhausted or overwhelmed or distracted, we are not wise, we are not balanced, and we are not reliable because we are not in our deliberate part of our brain. The second brain that we have is our automatic. I'm just going to put auto because you guys know, and this is the fast brain part of our brain. So your automatic brain and your deliberate brain are two parts of which information comes in and our brain responds to. So your automatic system lightens the load of your deliberate system. So your automatic system or brain, actually helps lessen the intensity of this deliberate brain. It actually helps you automate things, right? So it helps you automate what you most do and the things that take you a long time. It gives you shortcuts. It gives you a filter. Your automatic brain filters irrelevant information and options that we don't need, and it picks the things that are most important to us and the things that we most need to understand. So because when something comes into your brain, if your auto system kind of filters what's going to go in your deliberate part, this is awesome because it doesn't exhaust you, but it also leaves you blind spots because your automatic system has a filtering system. How many of you have ever had a technical problem and you've called the company and they said, we sent you the email and you said, I don't have the email. I've looked everywhere. Did you send it to this? You check all the names and everything. And then they'll say to you, did you check your spam folder? And you almost want to say, of course I check my spam folder. I'm an adult, but you do it anyway. And when you look in it, you see the email that you were looking for. And you go, oh, there it is. Okay, it happened. I just didn't see it. That's what our automatic brain often does. We get a lot of information coming at us. And if we were to take every part of all the information that was coming at us and process it and work on it and be deliberate, we would be exhausted. This is kind of what happens sometimes when you have, if you're on the spectrum or ADHD, which is what I have, our brains can take in information, and because we don't automatically filter it, we can get overwhelmed and distracted, and it's hard for us. And so our auto system helps us by filtering things that are irrelevant so we can get to the things that matter, so our deliberate brain can work on those areas. They're very important. But it's very important to understand there are positives to both sides of our brain, but also there are limitations. So the limitation of the automatic brain is blind spots. The limitation of deliberate brain is that we can get very tired. It can be very overwhelming, and often we can tend to just disengage because it's so much work. So inevitably, it's important to understand that you have both those strengths and weaknesses, but it also is important to understand that your reality is your reality, okay? So my reality, because of my automatic system, it creates and filters things that don't seem relevant to me. I can miss some very important things and say that never happened or that did happen because my brain filtered it so quickly and I missed it. And this is really important when it comes to our brains and how we live with intention. Because if we're going to live with intention, we have to actually start to interrupt our automatic brain and begin to understand what our deliberate brain is doing and begin to help both thrive. You can't always change your automatic filter and brain, but you can be deliberate. We're going to talk about that. So the first thing I really want to hit on is the idea of choosing your filters. So I can't always edit my folders, but I can also really look at my filter and make sure it's healthy and it's getting me the information that I need. Proverbs 23:7 says, "For as he thinks in his heart, so he is." We always say at Truth to Table, if you want to change your life, you have to change your thoughts, right? Whatever thought you're thinking is going to give you the exact outcome that you have right now. If you don't change your thoughts, the outcome of your life is going to be exactly what it is, because when you change your thoughts, it changes your life. Very, very important. So let's look at this for a minute. Your brain has an automatic filtering system, and it allows us to go on autopilot. Our brain triggers what's important and what's not important. And it also helps us focus on what's relevant and really prevents us from having information overload. So our brain has that selective attention. It allows us to know. And because of that, it's important that we understand, they call it confirmation bias, but it's important to understand that a lot of times our decisions that we make, or our preconceived ideas, or our beliefs about someone or something are often backed up because we've seen data around it. But we have to understand our brain finds that data and filters out the things that kind of discount that to allow us to believe that. Like if I think, I don't have enough time in my life. Well, if I believe that and my automatic brain says you don't have time for that, and it never gets to my deliberate part of my brain, then every time I think I want to change my life, I don't have time for that, my brain is going to look for evidence that I don't have time. I'm going to yawn and it's going to say, "See, you're tired." I'm going to miss something and my brain's going to say, "See, you keep missing things." I'm going to see somebody who said, "Yeah, I took a day and went on a walk," and I'll think, "I don't have time for a walk." And my brain is going to continue to build data that says I can't succeed in that area. And I want you to know that's real. You're not just a victim, or you're not just weak or apathetic, but you have to understand your brain is working for you or against you. And so what you feel and what you're experiencing is real. It just may not be reality. Does that make sense? I hope you're catching that. So this is very important. So we have to understand that there's this, they call it unintentional blindness, not intentional blindness, but unintentional blindness. And it's like an automatic blindness. In fact, they did a study, Harvard did a study, and they took experienced radiologists, and they were asked to look closely at a stack of scans of lungs to see if there's any sign of precancer, to look at the lymph nodes to see if anything was happening. And they went through all those that stack of images, but on the last image, the people that were doing the study had put on that last image, a gorilla in the picture. And so they went through all that stack of scans, and at the last part, there was a gorilla in the middle of that lung, and 83% of all experienced radiologists missed it. They never saw it. And it was wild because not only that, they were able to do eye tracking to see where those radiologists were looking. And they said the majority of them, their eyes viewed exactly where that gorilla was, but their brain never registered as that's not supposed to be there. And it was 48 times the size of an average lymph node. So the thing that they were looking for, it was almost half the size bigger, and they never witnessed it. And what they found is, and this is just simply the fact, what they weren't looking for, they simply didn't see. And this is powerful. These are educated, experienced, they're getting paid to look for it, but because their brain was so on that, I'm looking for this, I missed something very important. I want you to understand that in this brand new year, in order for you to change your life, in order for you to change your choices and your behaviors and your thoughts, you're going to have to understand that you have an unintentional blindness to the things that are going to help you. And you're going to need to find ways to kind of sober up in those areas to live that intentional life that you're called to live. And so studies show that what's important to us becomes our focus. There was a study done in France where they took volunteers and they didn't feed them. And then they did this food recognition test where they would sit and see, different words, what had a food recognition and if their brain would register. And some of them had been fed and some of them hadn't. And those that were hungry were able to find those words, those food words in that test way more than those that had been fed. So again, what we're hungry for, our brain will look for. So what I'm trying to say is we want to not just fight our brain or fight our system, but actually find out how it's created so we can reward it. So it's not always against being defensive, but it's actually being in discovery, which we're going to talk all about next week. It's one of my favorite parts of this topic, and it's very, very helpful. So again, what we understand is that our brain's attitude, the thing that we think, determines what we see. It determines the influence of our life. And so there was a story or this situation that had happened where they had taken this group of people and they had separated them and given them feedback. Some of the feedback was positive, some of the feedback was negative, but they'd given them feedback. And then they took them all into a room and they read them a story. And the story was completely neutral. There was no good, there was no negative, there was no positive. It was just a neutral story. And what they found after interviewing those individuals was those that had negative feedback before they listened to the story perceived the story as negative. And those that had positive feedback went to listen to the neutral story, had a positive outlook on the story. So this is why it's so important that we go after the things we think, because our brains are filters, and they either are going to open up our world or they're going to close up our world. Ephesians 4:23 says, to be made new in the attitude of your minds. Why is that important? Because it's important that if we're going to live with intention, it's not just a vision board or a dream board, or it's not just a gym membership, or it's not just a Bible reading plan. It's the idea that I have to change my thoughts. I have to actually grow in how I perceive my life. And whatever's on my automatic brain, I have to challenge to go into my spam folder and say, wait a minute, is there truth in there or are there lies? And then also, I need to not be stuck in a deliberate part of my brain to where I burn out in February. I'm overwhelmed. I'm doing 5 different things and I'm trying to do all my deliberate practices, and I miss the part that's just automatic, that allows me to filter things quickly. We're going to talk about that. So what is important? What's important to understand is that your perception of your life, your friendships, your church, your body, your whatever it might be, it may not be telling you the truth. And it may be that you want to go on autopilot, but it's actually not serving you. So what you want to do is before you set your your full year goal and your vision and your mission statement, even as a collective community here, I want us to get curious about our brains. I want us to begin to get curious of why did I think that and what's automatic and why am I tired? What am I using so much energy in a deliberate way that I'm not working very well? I want us to get curious, and we're going to unpack this. All you have to do is stick with us. You don't have to work too hard. Just stick with us on this series and we'll walk you through this. So again, while your automatic filtering cannot be turned off, it can be influenced. It can be influenced by setting daily priorities. And that's what we're going to get to at the end of the month and throughout this series. We're going to talk about how you can't stop this, but you can actually influence it. And then we're going to talk about how practicing certain things daily will help you help set up that positivity so your brain doesn't just fight you, but it actually goes with you. It actually helps you and empowers you. Very important. So more importantly today, as we close this podcast, I want you to walk away with a question. And that question is something I want you to think about for the next week as we get into this series. And that is, what particular reality would I like my brain to pay more attention to? What particular reality would I like my brain to pay more attention to? And that might be, I want to pay attention to God at work in my life. I want to pay attention to when I'm tired, and I want to make sure that I'm actually noticing that and how I feel during the day, whatever it might be. And I want you to begin to think about maybe some of your priorities. Maybe, my reality I'm not paying attention to is being grateful or having gratitude or being present to my family or really healing the inner part of me or my inner being. Even as a leader, am I taking care of my mind, will, and emotions in the process of leading? And so I really want you to think about, what is that reality that I'm focused on? And what is the reality that I want my brain to pay more attention to? And as we jump into next week, we're going to talk about the 3 A's of your day. What 3 A's? There's certain words that you need to have, the 3 of them, to set them up for you to live with intentional, practical, spiritual, godly intention. All right, you guys, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. And for all of you that are just jumping in for the first time, don't forget to subscribe. The entire series is going to be on intentional living this month. And I really hope we're going to hit it from a different angle. I hope that you enjoy that. And then secondly, I want you to know that if you are looking for a community of Bible-believing women, word girls that enjoy being able to jump in their busy life and meet others that are on that same journey, I want you to consider Truth Academy. You can do that by simply clicking the link in the bio to find out all the information. It's no commitment. You can click the link in the bio and find out the information to see if this community will serve your needs. If nothing else, thanks for being here. Welcome to a brand new year, and I'll catch you next time.